2 years ago, a Chinese robot company was selling a humanoid robot for $85,000. Today, that same company sells one for $5,900. That is not a discount. That is a 93% collapse in price. And it happened in about the time it takes most companies to redesign a logo. I found this story by accident, chasing a completely different rabbit hole about EV batteries, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. So let's actually walk through what happened here, because the price is the least interesting part of it, even though it's the part that will pull your jaw down first. The company is called Unitree. You've probably never heard of it. That's about to change. In 2023, they were selling a robot called the H1 for around 650,000 yuan, roughly the price of a very nice house down payment. It was clumsy. It fell over a lot. Nobody outside a lab took it seriously as anything but a novelty. Then something strange happened that almost never happens in hardware. The price kept dropping every single year, and the robot kept getting better at the same time. Normally, with manufacturing, you pick one. Cheaper usually means worse. Faster usually means more expensive. Unitree broke that rule, and I'll get to exactly how they pulled that off in a minute. But first, here's the part that made me sit up straight when I found the actual filing. You'd expect a company slashing prices this aggressively to be bleeding money, right, desperate, cutting corners to survive. The opposite happened. Unitree's gross margin didn't shrink. It grew, from 44% up to nearly 60%, while the price of the robot itself fell off a cliff. 60% margin is video game console launch territory, except consoles don't usually get 40% cheaper every year while margins climb. Before I get further into how that math even works, if you're watching this, drop your current monthly salary in the comments. I mean it. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which jobs this robot is coming for first, and I genuinely want to see if your answer changes after you watch. I read every comment, so don't be shy. And if this is your first Iron Circuit video, subscribe now. This channel exists to find the technology shifts that are about to change your industry before they hit the mainstream news cycle. This is one of them. Okay, so how does a company cut its price by more than 90% and get more profitable, not less? Vertical integration is the boring sounding answer, but stay with me because the result is not boring at all. Unitree builds its own motors, its own harmonic reducers, its own control boards, instead of buying them from outside suppliers who each take their own cut. When a US research firm tore down one of Unitree's earlier models, they estimated the actual parts cost at under $9,000 on a robot that was selling for many multiples of that. That gap between build cost and sale price is where the margin lives, and it's why cutting the price doesn't have to mean cutting the profit. But I promised you a marathon, and this next part is the moment that made me stop scrolling and actually research this properly. In April of this year, in Beijing, a humanoid robot ran a half marathon. Not a demo. Not a hallway lap for a press photographer. A real 21-kilometer public race alongside actual human runners on an actual course with actual barriers and actual turns. And the winning robot finished in 50 minutes and 26 seconds. That is faster than the current human world record for that distance. Read that again. A machine that 2 years ago couldn't walk down a hallway without falling now runs faster than the fastest human on Earth over that distance, and it did it without a person steering it. Nearly 40% of the robots in that race navigated the entire course on their own, no remote control at all. Last year's version of this same race, the winning robot took 2 hours and 40 minutes just to finish. 1 year. That's the entire gap between a stumbling novelty and a world record pace. Now here's where this gets personal for anyone who's ever looked at a Tesla price tag. Elon Musk has said, repeatedly, going back to 2023, that Tesla's own humanoid robot, Optimus, will cost somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 once it reaches full production. That's Musk's number, from the world's richest man, backed by one of the most sophisticated manufacturing operations on the planet. And the robot that just ran a world record half marathon in Beijing costs a third to a fifth of that. I'll come back to what Optimus can do that these Chinese robots still can't, because that gap matters, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. But on price alone, right now, today, the math doesn't favor the company most people assume is winning this race. Here's a comparison that might land harder than the marathon did. Go check what you paid for your car, or what your monthly car payment actually is. For a lot of people watching this, a humanoid robot right now costs less than that car sitting in your driveway, less than a used sedan. That's not a hypothetical 5 years out. You can buy one of these robots today, right now, for less money than most people spend on their vehicle. I want to hold on to something for a second, because it's the part of this story that actually explains why the price keeps falling instead of leveling off. It's not falling because the robots are getting cheaper and worse. Component costs across this whole industry are dropping hard because these robots share supply chains with China's electric vehicle industry. Batteries that cost around $140 per kilowatt hour just 2 years ago are now closer to $100 because EV manufacturing already built that cost curve and robots are just riding it downhill for free. Morgan Stanley expects material costs to fall further again this year alone. This is the part almost nobody talks about. This isn't a one-time fire sale. This is a structural cost collapse borrowed wholesale from an industry that already solved it. And I still haven't told you about the part of this story that genuinely changes who's playing this game, so hang tight, because it involves a name you already know from a completely different industry. Before that, one more number worth sitting with. A decent laptop costs more than some of these robots do right now. Let that sink in for a second. We are at the point where the entry price for a walking, balancing, semi-autonomous humanoid robot is roughly the same as the entry price for a mid-range laptop. That was not supposed to happen this decade, according to basically every projection made before 2024. Okay, here's the name. BYD, the company that outsold Tesla in global car sales. BYD just confirmed it is building its own humanoid robots, and its executive vice president Stella Lee said the plan is to eventually sell them through BYD's own dealership network, the same 9,000 plus stores that already sell you a car. Her exact framing was that Chinese robots currently have strong bodies but weak brains, while American robots have strong brains but weak bodies, and BYD wants both. Picture walking into a car dealership in a few years and being greeted by a robot instead of a salesperson, one that can also explain the car you're there to look at. The fact that the same company selling you an EV is now building the robot that might work your factory floor tomorrow, that is exactly the kind of connection this channel finds before anyone else is talking about it. Subscribe if you're not already. Turn on notifications. That's the only ask. Now, before I get to the honest limitations, because there are real ones, one more data point that matters because it doesn't come from a Chinese state report or a company's own press release. Morgan Stanley, an American Wall Street firm with every incentive to be skeptical, doubled its forecast for Chinese humanoid robot sales this year, projecting roughly 28,000 units, up 133% from last year. When Wall Street's own numbers move that fast in one direction, that's usually not hype. That's usually catch-up. So here's the honest section, and I'm not going to rush through it, because this is the part that separates an actually useful video from a hype reel. These robots are not walking into your house next week. Almost every single one of these units, the Agibot ones, the Unitree ones, the BYD ones, is going into a factory, a warehouse, a car dealership showroom, a research lab, not your living room. The dexterity required to fold your laundry, load your specific dishwasher, or safely navigate a home with kids and pets and stairs and pets that trip people, that is a fundamentally harder problem than walking fast on a flat marathon course with no obstacles. A marathon course is basically the easiest environment you could design for a bipedal robot. Consistent surface, predictable path, no surprises. Your kitchen is the opposite of that in almost every way. There's also the software gap that BYD's own executive pointed out. Impressive hardware and a genuinely useful, trustworthy general intelligence running that hardware are two very different achievements. And right now, the industry has made far more progress on the first one than the second. A robot that can run a marathon might still struggle to reliably pour a glass of water without spilling it, because running is a repeatable, practiced motion, and everyday chaos is not. And here's the piece I promised you earlier. The reason these robots are improving this fast at all is partly because NVIDIA has stepped in as an infrastructure backbone for the whole industry, formally naming Unitree's newest hardware platform as a reference body for its own humanoid AI software stack. That matters because it means the brain problem and the body problem are starting to get solved by different specialists working in parallel instead of every company trying to build both from scratch. So what's the honest timeline? Factory and warehouse deployment happening right now, this year, at real scale, tens of thousands of units. Retail and showroom robots like BYD's dealership plan, probably 1 to 2 years out, by their own executive's estimate. A genuinely useful robot working safely and reliably inside an average household, that's still most credible estimates saying 2 to 5 years away, minimum, and that's if the software problem keeps improving at the current pace, which is not guaranteed. Here's the question I genuinely want your honest answer on. At $5,900, cheaper than a lot of people's monthly rent in a major city, is the barrier to robot adoption actually price anymore, or is it something else entirely? Because if it's not price, the thing actually standing between this technology and your daily life is very different from what almost everyone assumes, and it changes the entire timeline people are predicting. Tell me your honest answer in the comments, and tell me what job you think gets touched first. If you want to understand the technology reshaping industries before your own industry realizes it's being reshaped, Iron Circuit is where that happens. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video covers what happens when these robots start replacing workers at the scale. BYD and others are now planning for their own factories this year alone, and the number that comes out of that math is the one that should actually change how you think about your own career, not some hypothetical future one. You do not want to miss that one.